Okay, this week we're on to chapter 11, where we're going to be discussing livable cities. Now, the one thing you'll notice with this chapter is that it discusses many of the planning elements that we've discussed previously. Now, this is going to talk about many of the planning and design elements. This is where the rubber meets the road, where we'll go into urban sprawl, zoning regulations, urban and regional planning, urban growth tools, densities, and so on and so forth. So you'll see that list. Now, as we discussed previously, one of the reasons that global sustainability is difficult to achieve is due to the increasing population. Now, this occurs when cities, that expand outward into the suburbs. The earlier established cities and the infrastructure, they have great pressure on them to put on them to, and are coming basically to the end of their lifespan. I mean, we saw this up in Michigan, where we have some of the water lines, and then you have lead contamination up in Flint, Michigan. That's a good example of deterioration caused by, basically it causes major public health issues by leaching that lead into the water system. Bridges, water, sewer lines, roadways, canals, electrical systems, rail lines, all will eventually need to be replaced. Now, as we design and maintain cities, we need to realize that many outside forces affect the livability of cities. Now, as the book discusses, everything from droughts to heat waves, altering growing conditions, increasing severe storms, and sea levels can impact a city or a county. And of course, once we reach peak oil, then gas prices will ultimately start and continue to rise. Now, these challenges, they present a great opportunity for planners, though. The design of cities, the placement of uses, transportation system options, preservation of natural systems, and utilization of alternative energy options can all help us reach a level of sustainability that can have a lasting impact on societies. Now, ultimately, sensible urban design creates livable cities. According to the book, a livable city is, quote, provides mixed-use development with safe and healthy neighborhoods, places for social interactions, interconnected green space, food, clean air and water, power from renewable energy, multiple modes of transportation, economic opportunity, and social inclusion. Now, if this definition sounds somewhat familiar, it's because sustainability has a similar definition to it. Now, the photo on this slide is of Melbourne, Australia, which was named the most livable city for the 6th year in a row in August 2016 by the Economist Intelligence Unit. The first U.S. city on the list was Honolulu, Hawaii, which ranked 17. So during this course, you've heard me mention urban sprawl many times. The book defines sprawl as being characterized by low-density land uses, single-use zoning, and automobile dependency. Now, sprawl is a planner's most challenging obstacle. Many counties and cities have implemented an urban service area boundary. Hillsborough County is no different, which limits. It's a line that limits development in going out to agricultural areas. Limits city or county services within those areas. It ultimately encourages development within the areas of the urban core. Now, these lines are continuously being redrawn due to the rapid growth and economic competition. Now, additionally, anti-growth management measures throughout the county and throughout the country are limiting the ability of planners to use this type of tool to limit urban sprawl. Urban sprawl, creates some negative side effects, of course. The loss of agricultural land, of course, is mentioned before. Habitat fragmentation, such as what's happening to Florida panthers in Florida. Obesity, more time, people spending more time in their automobiles. And social isolation. Of course, there are some plan developments to try to help this with the creation of their town centers and parks and walking trails, etc., but it doesn't appear to be many. Now, as we discussed previously, this type of development pattern started after World War II when automobiles took over the landscape, so to speak. Now, zoning was created to separate land uses that cause detriments to areas where people lived. For example, it prevents an industrial plant from being constructed adjacent to a single-family development, or a liquor store from being located next to a school. It provides buffers between buildings and uses, and provides for safety measures such as emergency access points and fire suppression systems, non-residential buildings. Now, zoning is challenging and almost didn't exist. As it's probably easy to understand, the city of New York adopted the first zoning ordinance in 1916. This was to prevent the equitable building from towering over residential uses and blocking the sunshine, which could cause, of course, problems with airflow, mold, etc. Since air conditioning wasn't around, and so it caused many different health issues. And in order to ensure that this regulation wasn't unfairly enacted, the city created an across-the-board regulation. These types of ordinances will always face under scrutiny. In fact, the first zoning ordinance described was challenged in Euclid, Ohio, in the Village of Euclid, Ohio versus Ambler Realty, which went to the Supreme Court in 1926. The premise of the case was that the village wanted to prevent the expansion of industry, since it would possibly change the feel of the village. They developed a zoning ordinance that created 6 classes of use, height, and area. The property in this case was divided into 3 use classes, which had various height restrictions. This hindered Ambler Realty from developing the land for industry. After going through a lower court, which constituted a taking of the property, it was then sent on to the Supreme Court, where Alfred Bettman, a planner and a lawyer, argued the case on the justification that the city had police power to enact the zoning ordinance. And so in a 5-4 vote, so it was very close, the court agreed with Euclid. Now, there are many other cases that were reviewed based on this type of ordinance, but none yet, fortunately, have been overturned or have fortunately overturned the Euclid case. Now, this information is not in your book, but if you go into the planning field or take the AICP exam, you'll need to know this information along with many other court cases. I may have a question on the quiz, so just take note. So, as the book states, urban and regional planning presents some difficult and complex challenges to a planner. It requires understanding development trends, that is, understanding migration patterns and understanding how many people are moving into a region and knowing where they're moving, who's moving to a location. Are they seniors who are going to need senior services such as medical facilities, bus services, or walkable streets? Or are they young professionals who are looking for houses near business centers? What type of services will they need? What transportation upgrades and maintenance is needed? And most importantly, and as the book states, how can we incorporate renewable energy, climate neutrality, and economic and social equity? This takes collaboration with experts and the community. It requires a top-down approach with professional skills, but a bottom-up approach with the community. If the community is not involved, you may inadvertently disenfranchise citizens, which can cause many, many problems. Now, along with all of that, urban planning deals with the actual design of a community and function of a place. The book discusses the variables within the patterns of urban development, which are sometimes referred to as the 5Ds. That is, density, diversity, design, destination, and accessibility, and distance to transit, basically. Basically everything we just went over and discussed. Now, there are many tools that planners use to control growth. Zoning, as discussed in the previous slide, is used to prevent incompatible uses from conflicting with one another. However, to prevent rapid expansion and to protect agricultural lands, you need another tool. One such tool is the urban growth boundary. Now, in Hillsborough County, like I said, we have something called the urban service area boundary. This tool is a line. It's adopted, and it identifies where development can occur. Essentially, it's the line where public services such as water and sewer, they stop. This line does a few things. First, it prevents urban sprawl. It prevents growth expanding so quickly that government can't pay for infrastructure costs, that being road, water, sewer, fire, police stations, schools, etc. And it helps to prevent valuable agricultural lands from, by ultimately promoting compact development. Density is the key to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Simply put, the more walkable community, the more people walk, they bike, and they take public transit, the lower ultimately the emissions are. But like I said, that's just simply put. It takes more than just a dense area to make a location walkable. Now, density supports walkable communities, transit, and affordable infrastructure services. It also creates a sense of place with social and economic opportunities. It provides the base for designing a community that supports complete streets and sustainable elements. Now, smart design in such an environment supports mixed-use development. Increased density also encourages infill development. Infill development is the process of constructing on either a property that is underutilized, this could be a redevelopment project, or vacant where infrastructure is already in place. Now, infill development can not only help to revitalize an area, but in certain cases be cheaper to build upon than outside of an urban core where services are not available. Now, there are LEED standards for neighborhood development, referred to as LEED, LEED -ND. To be LEED ND certified, the development must be compact with a minimum of 7 dwelling units per acre, which is the minimum density to support public transportation. Now, mixed-use development should always be encouraged in dense areas. They also create areas of walkability, sustainability, and economic growth. The book uses the term sustainable urbanism that encompasses mixed-use, compact, and walkable neighborhoods, which include a range of housing types. These include a range of uses such as retail, office, residential elements, but it also incorporates parks, passive and active, transit options, and as the book states, high-performance building and infrastructure. This all relates back to the standards required to be a LEED community. The benefits are what we discussed in the previous slide, which are less trips by automobiles, active residents, more eyes on the street, and most importantly, a sense of place. A walkable community or community should be the goal of any new development. As we know, that doesn't always happen. Now, planners should create policies, ordinances, or design guidelines that encourages high levels of walkability, mixed use, and transit options. Design guidelines provide standards for the area. These standards may include height, building facades, vegetation, required public spaces, or building design. Now, creating a walkable community means creating an environment where people feel safe to work. The Optimal size of a neighborhood is a quarter mile from center to edge, roughly speaking. Distances longer than that have a much larger automobile use rate. Now, the book goes into other characteristics of walkable neighborhoods as well. Neighborhoods should have interconnected, pedestrian-friendly streets with small block sizes and streets no more than 450 feet apart. Neighborhood streets should be designed for slow travel speeds, narrow roads, street trees on the sides of the roadways and in medians, sidewalks, well-designed crosswalks, bike lanes, all encourage vehicles to travel at a slower speed and facilitate walking. Now, smart growth is another approach to urban planning that helps to limit sprawl. The focus on smart growth is to locate development within the city centers and within older suburbs with infrastructure in a way that preserves open space and natural resources. Now, they're always pedestrian-friendly, walkable, and dense areas incorporated in them. It also encourages equity by adding a variety of low and high income housing types. There are 10 basic principles for smart design as developed by the Smart Growth Network. These are mixed land use, taking advantage of compact building design, creating a range of housing opportunities and choice, creating walkable neighborhoods, foster distinctive, attractive communities with a strong sense of place, preserve open space, farmland, natural beauty, and critical environmental areas, strengthen and direct development towards existing communities, provide a variety of transportation choices, make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective, and encourage community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions. Now, new urbanism is a fairly new term coined by Andrew Dewani. It's an urban design movement which is similar and closely related to smart growth. It focuses on a strong sense of place and community and incorporates many of the design elements of smart growth, but specifically looks at what makes a community attractive and successful. The Congress for New Urbanism promotes this type of design and serves as an organization for planners. It's similar to APA, or the American Planning Association. Their website has a lot of information on it, so I'd encourage you to check out their website at www.cnu.org. Now, with any development, you need supporting infrastructure. This includes everything that makes a community function, such as water, sewer, and roadways. These are generally referred to as gray systems. When we start talking about the natural environment and the requirements for human well-being, such as vegetation, open space, parks, green roofs, etc., we refer to it as green systems. Now, there are three terms you should be familiar with: greenfields, brownfields, and gray fields. Greenfields are those areas that are undeveloped, mainly open space. Brownfields are abandoned industrial sites, usually great for redevelopment opportunities. Aging suburban sprawl is referred to as gray fields. Gray fields and brownfields are great areas to improve a pattern of non-sustainable development. Now, throughout the semester, we have discussed durable social communities through diversity. Smart growth development promotes this type of development. Not only does it improve social settings now by creating resilient and sustainable communities, but as the book states, it prepares us for the post-carbon years ahead. Now, when we talk about sustainability, greenhouse gas emissions, and global warming, most of the time the discussion starts with the automobile. Transportation is the key to sustainability. Reducing the number of trips on the roadway, reduce the amount of roadway that needs to be constructed, and the levels will start to rise. The book gives a few statistics. Globally, 26% of the energy consumed and 23% of the greenhouse gases emitted are due to transportation. Those are extremely high numbers. Transportation is an integral part of the design of cities and counties. It is also the key component to any municipal budget. If we reduce the number of people on the roadway, limit urban sprawl, promote walkable communities, our energy consumption and greenhouse gas emission numbers will go down. Now, to assist this effort, cities are using Transportation Demand Management, or TDM. TDM is a set of tools and strategies for changing travel behaviors to reduce the numbers of automobile vehicle trips and miles driven. Strategies that are used include charging for parking, providing safe bike routes, car sharing or van pool services, offering telecommuting and compact development, etc. For many successful communities, you need to include public transit choices. This includes buses, including those with bicycle racks, bus rapid transit, or generally referred to as BRT. This is a large capacity bus that has a designated traffic lane, signaled priority and quick accessibility by passengers. Light rail cars travel on steel rails. They are more expensive than BRT, but they have a greater capacity and efficiency. Transit-oriented development, or TOD, is that which neighborhood development is clustered around the transit station. This is essential to smart growth. Now, the book states that TOD reduces total vehicle miles traveled by about 50%. Along with planning for smart growth communities with walkable elements, parks, mixed-use developments, etc., planners must make sure that cities are resilient against climate change, which may cause drought, flooding, heat waves, ecosystem changes, storm surges, sea level rise, etc. Many cities have developed climate action plans, which generally have parallel goals according to the book. These are to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and move towards climate neutrality in order to help reduce the severity of climate change and to prepare for responding to changes that are now inevitable. Now, communities must be resilient, which the book defines as the capacity of a system to absorb disturbance and still retain its fundamental function and structure, whether that system is an ecosystem or a city. This will always be a challenge for urban planners. Okay, that is it for the chapter on livable cities. Don't forget that all your assignments are due no later than Saturday night at 11:59 or midnight. If you have any questions or need to meet with me to discuss any of the chapters or any of your assignments, please send me an email and we'll schedule a time. Thanks so much. Have a good week.